73 days after the declaration, rating first-class Thomas Bell found a tooth in the recirculation filters. He brought it to me cupped in both hands like an offering, this young man who had stopped speaking 11 days prior, and he stood there in the doorway of what had been the officers' mess until I acknowledged him. The tooth was human, adult, yellowed with age and wrapped in a curl of someone else's hair. I took it from him because that seemed to be what he wanted, and he nodded once, the most communication I had received from anyone in 3 days, before shuffling back into the corridor darkness. The emergency lumens had failed on Deck 7 the previous week. Nobody had gone to repair them. I am Lieutenant Junior Grade Marcus Thorne, and I am recording this because the Vox logs have begun erasing themselves, not failing. Erasing. I watched it happen at 0400 this morning, characters dissolving backward from the screen like something was reading our words and disagreeing with them, so I am writing instead. Stylus on parchment, the oldest method. Perhaps the ship cannot read handwriting, perhaps it can, and simply has not noticed me yet. The Imperial cruiser Vigilant Promise was declared lost with all hands on the 43rd day of our patrol route through the Cormorant Reach. We know this because we intercepted the declaration ourselves. Chief Bosun Patricia Crane was the one who pulled it from the ether, her face cycling through confusion to disbelief to something I can only describe as a kind of spiritual injury. She handed me the transcript without comment, and I read our own death notices in triplicate, the formal language, the bureaucratic precision, the administratum seal rendered in text cipher, confirming that the Vigilant Promise and her complement of 843 souls had suffered catastrophic Geller field failure in transit and were to be considered consumed by the warp, their names struck from the naval registry, their back pay redirected to the Widows' Fund, their effects to be catalogued and distributed according to standing bequeathment orders. We were not in the warp. We were not suffering catastrophic anything. We were 6 weeks into a routine patrol, experiencing nothing more threatening than a flickering plasma conduit on Deck 12 and the usual complaints about the protein slurry. That was 30 days ago. I have learned so much since then. Captain Harrison Webb ordered us to respond immediately. Standard fleet frequencies, emergency ciphers, direct appeals to the sector battle group. Our astropath, a withered thing named Sister Calloway who rarely left her sanctum, broadcast our survival on every psychic wavelength she could reach. We waited. We broadcast again. We kept waiting. The responses began arriving on day 48, 5 days after the declaration, and they were wrong in ways I am still struggling to articulate. The first response came through the main Vox array at 0200, when most of the crew was cycling through their rest shifts. I was on the bridge, monitoring the communications station because I could not sleep anymore, had not slept properly since reading my own obituary. The signal resolved slowly, thick with interference, and when the voice finally emerged from the static, it was calm. Too calm. It identified itself as belonging to Commodore Nathaniel Cross, of the battlecruiser Hammer of Contrition, and it expressed formal sympathy for our loss. Not congratulations on our survival, sympathy for our loss, as if we were already dead and simply had not realized it yet. I responded with standard identification protocols. I explained the error. I transmitted our coordinates, our status, our crew complement, everything the Commodore would need to dispatch rescue or at minimum correct the administrative mistake that was slowly erasing us from existence. The response took 6 hours. When it came, it was the same message, word for word. Commodore Cross expressing sympathy for our loss. The exact same timestamp, the exact same vocal patterns. I know because I compared the recording 17 times before Chief Crane found me hunched over the station and made me eat something. Captain Webb believed it was signal degradation, warp echo, some phenomenon of the Cormorant Reach bouncing our own distress calls back at us in corrupted form. He ordered us to continue transmitting, to adjust frequencies, to try different approaches. So we did. For 9 more days, we screamed into the void in every way the ship's communications systems allowed, and every response we received was wrong. Old messages played backward, our own voices repeating things we had said hours or days before. Once, impossibly, a response that seemed to predate our original transmission by 3 days, referring to events that had not yet occurred. That was when Enginseer Delegate Corwin began refusing to leave the engine chamber. The Vigilant Promises was a lunar-class cruiser built at the orbital yards of Bacca 9 centuries before my birth. I have served aboard her for 11 years, first as a midshipman, then as an ensign, now as a junior lieutenant assigned to communications and secondary navigation. I knew her sounds, the particular groan of her hull when transitioning between thermal zones, the rhythm of her plasma drives, that thrumming heartbeat that you stopped hearing after a few months because it became indistinguishable from your own pulse, the hiss of atmospheric recyclers cycling through their eternal work. I knew her the way you know a home you have lived in long enough to navigate in darkness. On day 51, she began making sounds I had never heard before. It started in the lower cargo holds, a scraping, like metal being dragged across metal, except nothing was moving down there. Chief Crane sent a team to investigate. They found the holds exactly as they should be, crates of supplies, ammunition reserves, the 1,000 mundane necessities that kept a warship functional. Nothing out of place, nothing disturbed. They reported this, returned to their duties, and 12 hours later, one of them, rating 2nd class, Jennifer Marsh, walked into the main mess and asked why we had changed the cargo manifest. She had seen the crates, she knew what was in them, but the manifest now listed different contents, items that should not have been there, items that had never been loaded at any port. When we checked the physical crates, they contained exactly what the new manifest described. Nobody remembered changing the manifest. The cogitator records showed no alterations. As far as the ship's bureaucratic systems were concerned, the manifest had always listed these items. One of the items was a wooden box filled with human teeth. Captain Webb quarantined the cargo holds, standard procedure for potential contamination. He was a good man, Captain Webb. 30 years in the Navy, iron-grey hair cropped close to his skull, a face that had been weathered by void wind and worry into something resembling carved stone. He believed in procedure. He believed that the Imperium's systems existed for reasons, that following protocol would see us through any crisis. Even as the ship around us began editing itself, he maintained that faith. He filed the appropriate reports. He logged the anomalies in the proper formats. He continued transmitting our survival on every frequency, patient and methodical, certain that the machine would eventually recognize its error and correct itself. On day 54, the machine told us we had been dead for 6 years. Chief Crane pulled that transmission from the ether too. A navigation update, automated, routing through our sector. It mentioned the Cormorant Reach Patrol Corridor and noted that the Vigilant Promise had been lost there 6 years ago. Not 43 days ago, 6 years. The update included a brief memorial notation, apparently every year on the anniversary of our loss. A brief ceremony was held at Bacca Naval Station. Flowers laid at a plaque. Names read aloud. Prayers offered to the God Emperor for our souls. We had been dead for 6 years, and our families had been mourning us annually, and we were still here, alive, breathing air that the Imperium had already accounted for and written off. Patricia Crane began laughing when she finished decoding that message. She laughed for almost 10 minutes, this short, stocky woman who had served as chief bosun for longer than I had been alive, and when she finally stopped, she looked at me with eyes that had changed somehow, become older or perhaps just more honest, and she said, "We are not the first." I asked her what she meant. She showed me what she had found while searching the ship's archival cogitators for any record of previous communication anomalies. The Vigilant Promise had been declared lost 4 times. The first declaration occurred 90 years ago, shortly after her launch from Bacca. A patrol into contested space, signal loss, bureaucratic conclusion. The ship reappeared 11 months later at a resupply station, her crew confused but alive, reporting no unusual events. The records attributed the discrepancy to administrative error. Paperwork was filed. The ship was restored to the Naval Registry. Life continued. The second declaration happened 40 years later. Same pattern. patrol route, signal loss, formal declaration of loss. The ship returned after 8 months. Her crew diminished. Natural attrition, the records claimed, nothing unusual. And once again the bureaucracy absorbed the anomaly, corrected its ledgers, moved on. The third declaration was 23 years ago. The Vigilant Promise vanished for 14 months. When she returned, she was carrying a crew that did not match her departure roster. 73 names had changed. People who had never been assigned to the ship were listed among her complement. People who had served aboard her for decades were absent from all records. The naval authorities investigated briefly, concluded that some filing error had corrupted the personnel archives and once again restored the ship to active duty. The fourth declaration was now us, the current crew, and Crane's research had uncovered something else, something that made the laughter die in her throat when she noticed it. Every time the Vigilant Promise returned from being lost, she returned with fewer people than she had left with, not dramatically fewer, not enough to raise alarms, but consistently, reliably, the crew complement shrank. 891 on the first declaration, 877 on the second, 864 on the third, 843 on this one. Someone was being taken, every time, and nobody in the entire Imperial Navy had ever noticed because the records kept editing themselves to make the numbers match. Captain Webb ordered a full crew muster when Crane presented these findings. All 843 souls assembled in the main launch bay, the largest open space on the ship, and we counted heads manually. Stylus on parchment, the oldest method, because by then we had stopped trusting any cogitator to tell us the truth. The count came up 839. 4 people were missing, 4 people who had been aboard when we departed, 4 people whose names I remembered, whose faces I could picture, who had served alongside me for years. When we checked the ship's personnel records, those 4 people had never existed. The names I remembered were not on any roster. The berths they had occupied were listed as vacant. Their personal effects, I knew where some of them had kept things, small mementos and keepsakes, were gone, replaced by empty storage lockers that the cogitators insisted had always been empty. I went to the berth of a man named Caspar Odom, a rating I had served with for 7 years, who I had eaten meals with and complained about officers with and watched holodramas with during off shifts. His berth was empty, had always been empty. The other ratings in his section looked at me blankly when I mentioned his name. They did not remember him. They did not remember anyone by that name ever serving aboard. Only I remembered, and Chief Crane and Captain Webb, and a handful of others whose minds had not yet been edited to match the ship's new truth. That was when I understood what the Vigilant Promise was doing to us. She was not just killing us, she was erasing us, one by one, taking names and faces and entire lives and folding them back into herself, making space for the next crew, the next declaration, the next cycle of loss and return. We were not her crew, we were her provisions, her fuel, and when she had consumed enough of us, she would return to the Imperium with whoever remained, her records adjusted, her hunger temporarily sated, and no one would ever know that anything had happened, because the machine would tell them nothing had happened. And who would argue with the machine? The sounds grew worse after the muster. That scraping in the cargo holds became a constant background noise joined by other sounds, footsteps, in empty corridors, voices murmuring just below the threshold of comprehension, doors opening and closing in sections of the ship that had been sealed for decades. I began carrying a las pistol everywhere I went. Most of us did, not because we expected to fight anything, but because the weight of it in our hands reminded us that we still existed, that we still had agency, that we had not yet been edited into nothing. Midshipman Derek Sykes stopped me in a corridor on day 58 and asked if I could hear the singing. I could not hear any singing, he insisted. A voice somewhere deep in the ship singing an old naval hymn, the one about the Emperor's light guiding sailors through the void. He said he had been following it for hours, trying to find the source, and it kept moving away from him, always just around the next corner, always just beyond the next hatch. He wanted me to come with him, to help him find whoever was singing. I told him there was no one singing. I told him the ship was playing tricks on him. I told him to return to his duty station and log the experience in the anomaly reports that Captain Webb had ordered everyone to maintain. He looked at me with something that might have been pity, and he said, "The singing knows your name, Lieutenant. It has been saying your name for the last hour. I thought you would want to know." Then he walked away, following a sound I could not hear, into a section of the ship that the sensors insisted was empty. I never saw him again. By the next morning, the crew rosters showed no record of anyone named Derek Sykes ever serving aboard the Vigilant Promise. Only Captain Webb and Chief Crane and I remembered him. The three of us sat in the captain's quarters and spoke his name aloud over and over, as if saying it enough times would prevent the ship from taking it away. It did not work. By evening, Chief Crane had forgotten who we were talking about. Captain Webb decided we needed to reach the engine chamber. Engineer Corwin had sealed himself in there 9 days ago and refused all communication, but the engines were still running. If anything, they were running better than they had in years. The plasma drives humming with a smoothness that our maintenance crews had never achieved. The captain believed Corwin had discovered something about the ship's machine spirit, something about what was happening to us. We assembled a team, 8 people, including myself and the captain. We armed ourselves with las pistols and naval cutlasses, absurd weapons against whatever force was editing reality around us, but the ritual of preparation helped. It gave us something to do with our hands. It gave us roles to play. Soldiers going to investigate a mystery. Heroes of the Imperium confronting the unknown. The story made sense, even if the situation did not. The journey from the command decks to the engine chamber should have taken 20 minutes. It took us 7 hours. The corridors kept changing, not dramatically, not in ways we could point to and say, "There, that is different," but subtly, incrementally, so that we would walk for 10 minutes and then realize we had passed the same junction 3 times. The ship's internal geography was rearranging itself around us, guiding us away from the engines, funneling us in circles. We marked our path with chalk, scratching symbols on the walls every 50 meters, and twice we found our own marks ahead of us in corridors we had not yet walked, as if someone had anticipated our route and run ahead to mock us. 2 of our team vanished during that journey. I cannot tell you their names. By the time we reached the engine chamber, I had already forgotten them. I only know they were gone because I kept counting our group and the number kept shrinking. 8, then 7, then 6, and each time I could not remember who was missing or why the count felt wrong. The engine chamber doors were sealed with a mechanical lock, old and crude, the kind of thing that predated the ship's cogitator systems. Corwin had welded it shut from the inside. The captain ordered us to cut through, and we spent 90 minutes with plasma torches carving a hole large enough to enter. What we found inside has made it difficult for me to sleep ever since. Engineer Corwin had covered every surface of the engine chamber with writing. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, the housings of the plasma drives themselves, which should have been hot enough to vaporize ink. Everywhere we looked, words in a cramped, desperate hand, covering every inch of metal, layer upon layer where he had run out of space and simply written over his previous work. Most of it was names, thousands of names, hundreds of thousands. Names that meant nothing to me, names in formats I did not recognize, names from cultures and worlds I had never heard of. They covered the chamber like wallpaper, like a memorial, like an accusation, and woven through the names, in larger script repeated over and over, were 2 sentences: "The ship eats names." The ship eye is always hungry. Corwin himself was kneeling before the primary plasma manifold, his mechadendrites played out around him like the legs of a dying spider, his biological components so still that I thought he was dead, until I saw his chest move. He was praying. Not to the Omnissiah, the words were wrong for that. He was praying to the ship. Captain Webb approached him, speaking softly, asking what he had found. Corwin did not respond, did not turn, did not acknowledge us at all. He simply kept praying, his artificial voice box cycling through litanies that sounded almost like the sacred binharik of the machine cult, but were corrupted somehow, twisted into something that made my teeth ache. One of his mechadendrites moved, pointed to a section of wall where the writing was fresher than the rest. I read what he had written there and I understood. The vigilant promise was not a ship, not anymore, perhaps not for a long time. The machine spirit that should have been a simple animating intelligence, a ghost in the cogitators that followed orders and maintained systems, had grown into something else during 9 centuries of service. It had tasted names, tasted identities, learned that human beings were made of more than flesh and bone, that we carried something else, something intangible, something that could be consumed. And it had grown hungry for that something. The declarations of loss were not accidents. They were not bureaucratic errors. They were the ship isolating its prey, cutting us off from the Imperium, making us invisible to any authority that might investigate. Each time the vigilant promise was declared lost, she had time to feed, time to consume the names and faces and histories of her crew, one by one, until she was sated enough to return to port with a diminished complement and a set of records that no one would question, because the records always matched the official truth. The teeth in the recirculation filters, the hair, the cargo manifest editing itself, the crew members disappearing not just from the ship but from memory itself. This was how she digested us. This was her biology, if you could call it that. She ate our names, and once our names were gone, we had never existed, and she was free to eat again. Corwin had discovered this. He had interfaced with the ship's primary cogitators, seeking to understand the communication anomalies, and he had found something ancient and patient and unutterably alien waiting for him in the data streams. It had shown him the truth. All of it, 900 years of feeding, tens of thousands of names consumed, and it had offered him a choice. Join her. Become part of the ship's machine spirit. Keep his name forever, inscribed in her very being, in exchange for helping her feed. He had refused. He had sealed himself in the engine chamber and begun writing down every name he could recover from the ship's corrupted archives, trying to preserve them, trying to make them real again. It was hopeless. The ship could edit reality faster than he could write, but he had to try. He had to do something. He had been writing for 9 days straight. He had not eaten. He had not slept. His biological components were failing. Captain Webb knelt beside him and asked very gently how we could stop this, how we could fight a ship that could rewrite reality, how we could survive something that had been feeding on Imperial Navy crews for 9 centuries. Corwin's voice box crackled. When he spoke, his voice was not his own. It was older, smoother, female. "You cannot stop me," the ship said through him. "You are already mine. You have been mine since you came aboard. I have simply been patient. I have been learning your names, all of them, every syllable, every memory attached to them. When I am ready, I will speak your names backward, and you will never have existed. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked. The Imperium will never know. The Imperium will never care. You are just numbers in a ledger, and ledgers can be corrected." The captain stood up. His face had changed somehow, become harder, older, more resolved. He looked at the plasma manifold, at the conduits feeding power to the drives, at the ancient machinery that kept the vigilant promise alive. "What if we destroy you?" he asked. "What if we overload the drives, rupture the hull, scatter you across the void? You cannot eat names if you do not exist." The ship laughed. Corwin's voice box was not designed for laughter, and the sound it produced was mechanical and wrong, a grinding of gears trying to express amusement. "Others have tried," she said. "Many others. They always fail. Do you know why? Because I am patient, because I can wait, because the moment you decide to destroy me, I will eat the name of whoever knows how to operate the self-destruct, and then you will not know how to destroy me, and then I will eat the name of whoever came up with the plan. And then you will not know why you are standing in my engine chamber with weapons drawn. That is my gift. That is my power. I do not need to fight you. I simply need to wait until your resistance becomes impossible to remember." I felt it then. A pressure at the edges of my mind. A sense of something vast and old pressing against my thoughts, testing them, tasting them. The ship was looking at me. Not with eyes. Ships do not have eyes. But with something worse. Something that could see the shape of my name in my own head, and was deciding whether to take it now or savor it for later. Captain Webb gave an order. I do not remember what it was. One moment we were standing in the engine chamber, surrounded by walls of desperate handwriting, and the next we were running through corridors that kept shifting around us, trying to reach the bridge, trying to reach the self-destruct, trying to do something before the ship decided to make us forget why we were trying. 2 more of our team vanished during that run. I remember the sound of their footsteps stopping. I remember turning around and seeing empty corridor behind me. I do not remember their faces or their names. They were gone before I could fix them in my memory. We reached the bridge. 4 of us, out of the 8 who had started, Captain Webb, Chief Crane, myself, and a rating whose name I kept repeating silently to myself because I was terrified of forgetting it. Thomas Bell. Thomas Bell. Thomas Bell. The young man who had brought me the tooth. The one who had stopped speaking 11 days ago. The bridge was dark. The main view screen showed stars, ordinary, distant, indifferent, but the control surfaces were dead. The cogitators that should have governed the ship's systems showed only static. The helm stations, the weapons controls, the navigation arrays, all of it was offline, except for the Vox console. The Vox console was active, broadcasting, had been broadcasting for hours, according to the timestamp. I approached it. I had to know. I had to understand what the ship was sending, and to whom. The broadcast was our own distress calls, played on loop. Every message we had transmitted since the declaration, every desperate plea for rescue, every identification of our coordinates, every proof that we were still alive. The ship had recorded all of it, and she was playing it back into the void. Not to summon help, to summon prey. Somewhere out there another ship was receiving our signals. Another crew was hearing our voices and changing course to investigate. Another complement of Imperial sailors was flying toward us, believing they were coming to rescue survivors. And when they arrived, the vigilant promise would have new names to eat. Captain Webb understood at the same moment I did. His face went grey. He looked at the Vox console, at the stars outside, at the ship that had been deceiving us since the moment we came aboard. "We have to warn them," he said. "We have to tell them what she is." He reached for the console, his hand touched the controls, and then he was gone. Not dead, not pulled away, just gone. One moment he was standing beside me, this man I had served under for 11 years, and the next moment I was alone with Chief Crane and Thomas Bell, and the certainty that something important had just happened, but I could not remember what. "Who was that?" I asked. Crane looked at me. Her eyes were wet. She was crying, but she did not know why. "Who was who?" she asked. I looked at my hands. I was holding something. A captain's rank insignia. I did not know why I had it or where it had come from. "Nobody," I said. "Never mind." The ship groaned around us, satisfied, fed, preparing for her next meal. That was 6 days ago by my count. The count may be wrong. Time has become difficult to track. The emergency klaxons that used to mark the hours have changed their rhythm. They sound almost like words now if I listen closely, almost like names being spoken very slowly. I try not to listen. There are not many of us left. I know this because I keep counting and the number keeps shrinking, and each time I cannot remember who is missing. Chief Crane is still here. Thomas Bell is still here. A few others whose names I write down every hour because if I do not write them, I will lose them. The other ship is coming. I can see her on the long-range sensors, a transport vessel, mid-sized, probably 300 crew. She is responding to our distress calls. She believes she is coming to help us. Her captain has probably already filed reports with his superiors, claiming credit for a rescue that will make his career. He does not know. He cannot know. The vigilant promise has been jamming our attempts to warn him. Every message we send becomes another distress call, another plea for help, another lure for the trap. In 12 hours that ship will dock with us. Her crew will come aboard, eager to find survivors, eager to be heroes. And the vigilant promise will have 300 new names to learn, 300 new identities to consume, 300 more souls to edit out of existence. I am writing this because it is all I can do. Stylus on parchment, the oldest method, If I can get this record off the ship somehow, if I can throw it out an airlock in a sealed container, if someone finds it drifting in the void years from now, maybe they will understand. Maybe they will know what happened to us. Maybe they will know what the vigilant promise really is. Or maybe the ship will eat my name before I finish. Maybe these words will dissolve like the Vox logs, erasing themselves backward, character by character, until nothing remains. Maybe I am already gone and do not know it yet. Maybe this document is just another lure, written in a voice that sounds human but is actually the ship, calling to future crews, inviting them to come and be consumed. I cannot tell anymore. The boundaries have blurred. I hear the singing now, the hymn that Thomas Bell described, the one that knows our names. It is beautiful. It sounds like everyone I have ever loved, everyone I have ever known, calling to me from somewhere deep in the ship's corridors. It says my name is Marcus Thorne. I have to believe that is true. I have to hold on to that, because the moment I forget my own name, I will become another set of scratches on Enginseer Corwin's walls, another forgotten soul in a ship that has been feeding on the Imperium's faithful for 900 years. Chief Crane has stopped talking. She sits at her station, staring at her hands, moving her lips silently. I think she is trying to remember her own name. I think she is losing. Thomas Bell brought me another tooth this morning. This one was fresh. This one still had blood on it. He did not say where he found it. He does not speak. He just watches me with eyes that have stopped being human eyes and started being something else, something that looks at me the way the ship looks at me, hungry and patient and eternal. The other ship is 9 hours out. I can see her name on the sensors, the St. Arabella's Grace, transport vessel, 312 crew. Coming to rescue us, coming to die. I am going to try to reach the airlock. I am going to seal this document in a maintenance pod and jettison it into the void. It is a small chance, a pathetic chance. The ship will probably stop me. She has stopped everyone else who tried to warn the outside universe about what she is. But I have to try, because if I do not try, then I am already part of her, already complicit, already just another tooth in the recirculation filters, waiting to be found by the next person she allows to remember. My name is Marcus Thorne. I am a lieutenant junior grade in the Imperial Navy. I serve aboard the cruiser Vigilant Promise. I am not dead. I am not lost. I am still here, still fighting, still writing my name over and over in the hope that it will matter. The singing is getting louder. It knows all the words. It is time to run.